if I made an RTS game, I'd probably have ray tracing on it and units going through puddles.
Hello, everybody. I'm here with Mike Swanson, the studio art manager of Supreme Commander and Forged Alliance, and also the senior producer of Supcom 2. Mike, thanks for building the best game in the world.
Well, thank you. Certainly wasn't a solo effort, and kudos out to Chris Taylor for assembling a team and a great company to make it.
Cool. So we really want to talk about the Supreme Commander games today, but I've seen a lot of the stuff that you've been working on your LinkedIn. Do you want to tell us quickly, like, what sort of titles you've been working on?
I think I can't talk about what I'm doing currently. That's under wraps for right now. But I mean, I've held quite a few roles. I think I've started out at Electronic Arts Canada. I worked on probably just about every single sports game known to man. Which actually kind of leads into this, because Chris Taylor and I both worked together at Electronic Arts Canada. That's where we met. We're talking in the early '90s, and then I went off after after Electronic Arts and worked for LucasArts. Worked on a ton of Star Wars games, and I think during that time, Chris Taylor went off to start working at Cave Dog, working on Total Annihilation. And then after LucasArts, I thought I might want to go back into artwork again. So I worked at Take-Two, and then, I kind of went around to a whole bunch of companies. And then I went back to Gas Powered after that, and stayed with Gas Powered right to the very end. And then, when Gas Powered sort of evaporated, I left. I went to Relic Entertainment on another RTS Warhammer, and then I took a venture away from making games. I went to NVIDIA, and helped out with where I could actually help out with all the game developers. And so, I got to work on numerous titles, helping them get their games running faster on NVIDIA card sets. Then after that, kind of took a bunch of roles and did my own consulting business for a while, and then finally ending up back at Sony.
Working on a mystery.
Yeah.
So the work that you did for NVIDIA sounds quite technical. Is it talking about like how to get things running on graphics cards and draw calls and all that type of stuff?
Exactly. Like a lot of it was about looking at, a lot of the games will get a lot of stutter in them, micro stutter, and also just making sure the frame rates, for PC players especially, they want the games. If they get a high-end card, they want that game to run like 90 frames a second, right? Especially, you mentioned VR earlier. For VR games, they have to run 90 frames a second, otherwise you're going to get sick. And so really only some of these high-end cards, 1080 Ti's and things like that, will actually be able to run them like that. So we would go into a lot of studios, and a lot of games out there, now if they're making games for consoles, those games a lot of times are sort of frame locked to 30. And that's always the big difference between console players and PC players. Console players are fine with their games at 30. PC players aren't. They want, a lot of times if they're going to be playing some of these big games, they want to be able to play them fast, but they also want really nice graphics. And I think for a game like Supreme Commander, it used to be able to bring PCs to their knees, because if you have so many units on the screen, you can zoom way out, things would really slow down. And so, I think that was one of the big challenges as well on Supreme Commander. If your game can only run on fast PCs, then you're just going out to the prosumer market, but trying to make a game like that run well for everybody was certainly a challenge, right? And I think especially as the games got bigger and bigger, it'd be interesting to see what a game like that would look like nowadays. There's not that many RTSs coming up, and I think Relic's making a new Age of Empires game. It'll be interesting to see, because I can't think of any other new big RTS games that are coming out soon. So,
yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about your role and responsibilities on Supreme Commander and Forged Alliance?
Yeah, so I was hired on as the studio art manager. When I got to Gas Powered, they weren't just doing Supreme Commander. They actually had several other projects on the go, and so they want to bring in someone who could, one, just manage all the artists, but also help out with, their hiring. And also, because I had a background in not quite in production, but at least being a lead artist at Electronic Arts, I knew how to staff productions up accordingly. So I could also just get involved a little bit in the art and do a little bit of firefighting if there was stuff that we needed to hire more people for. But also, gas powered hadn't really done anything outsourcing, and back then outsourcing was kind of a brand new concept. And so getting them used to it. We didn't do much on Supreme Commander, but then on Forge Alliance we actually did. And so we actually started doing more outsourcing, especially over to China. Right now it's just everybody does outsourcing. They don't think anything about it. But back then it was really a risk that you're willing to take to go send out your IP across the water to a company you've never met, to people you've never met. And so I was able to kind of bridge that gap and do that. Also, a lot of the other stuff that we're doing is, if you remember, there was a lot of cinematics in it, and even though they weren't like Blizzard quality cinematics, we still wanted them to be as awesome as possible. And so putting together those, I remember there was a lot of work that went into wrangling how we did that, and getting the rendering done for those while you're busy making a game. They also had a guy, Steve Thompson, who was heading up a lot of the cinematics. Was, I think, at one point the lead artist at Gas Powered, and he'd be a good guy to talk to as well. If you can get in touch with him. So he helped put together a lot of those cinematics, and he was kind of a wizard at it. So I worked with Steve, and I worked with the executive producers, because there was a lot of arm wrestling about how to do this grandiose story and keep it contained with it, because when you're doing cinematics you can burn millions of dollars, and every minute is almost like $1 million of effort. And so trying to contain the spend on that was a little bit of my responsibility as well.
Yeah.
And then on Fortune Alliance, again, I was managing that project, also managing other ones. And then there was a point in the studio, we did another game called Space Siege that was not critically acclaimed game. And then I jumped on to Supreme Commander 2 and turned into a full production role at that point. So I still kind of have my fingers in the art management, but I was actually, as a senior producer, working really closely with the publisher on that, and really working closely with the team to get that out. And that was also, we did that game for PC and Xbox. So trying to do an RTS on a console it's extremely challenging.
Yeah. And I think many people attribute that fact as to why Supreme Commander 2 didn't go as well as the first one.
Yeah, I think that's, and that's one of those things. When you try to be all things for all people, you essentially will water down the experience. I think you find that in any medium, right? Whether it's movies, books, or everything. If you want to please everybody, and I think that was a great thing about Supreme Commander, is that it kind of went for the hardcore players and just kept firmly there. It was like, this is the audience. We know it's not going to be, when you make a game like that, it's not going to be a Red Dead Redemption or one of these other games that has this huge broad appeal. But the nice thing is about the players, if you make a game like that, and then you make a Forge Alliance, you get those same players back. They're very loyal. Then I think when you do something like Supreme Commander 2, and you try and sort of increase your market and try to go for a more casual gamer, then you get hammered by your loyal fan base.
Cool.
It's also, it's interesting, because I think you'll probably find this with the previous people, is that as the publisher no longer exists for it, most of us can speak a little freer without fear of retribution.
Right. That's convenient for interviews.
Maybe, I'm hoping, fingers crossed. Don't sue me if you're watching this, and for the things I'm about to say.
Okay. So you have lots of the managerial type producer, project management type of skills, but with the art stuff, it sounds like you're actually involved in the nuts and bolts from a technical point of view, actually creating art.
I wasn't creating art. I was I was getting the artist, on each of these games, you're going to have a lead artist. And then, making sure that you have other people, like you have someone like, there's a guy, Mark IV was the UI artist on the original Supreme Commander. And I think he just did a bang up job for how many buttons are on there. I know it was kind of a stressful job is also just, managing. So a lot of times what I would do is I'd do the change management, because there's so many, you've got Chris Taylor, you've got Brad, there's an executive producer, there's a whole bunch of people. And, sometimes you start getting so many cooks in the kitchen. And, Chris is such an idea guy. He's got he sees something in the game and he's got 8 new ideas coming out of that. So I think, for me, on that management is sort of managing the changes and trying to protect some of the people like Mark, who, he's doing a whole UI scheme and then, oh, we're going to change it. And then coming back to that, and also making sure that this stuff, we could do it with the amount of people that we have. And also, again, just kind of looking out towards towards things like memory management, right? Like Supreme Commander only works because it had a damn fine LOD system in it, right? And making sure that you could do it while you're zooming out without things popping. That's the trick. And having enough people and having those people have enough time to do that and do it well is, it's kind of the trick. I think a lot of people just think oh, you just make a beautiful model, throw it in the game. If you guys are doing mods, you understand this. That's just, I always tell people, I go, making a game is like, you look at an iceberg on the water and you see the tip of it, but most of the iceberg is underneath the water. And that's all the work you need to do to get these things running in game and looking good in game as the camera's moving around. Especially I think it's a game like Supreme Commander Forged Alliance where the camera zooms out and zooms in. And I remember, from when I played those games, I was always zooming out, and sometimes I'd play in the zoomed out mode. Sometimes for most of the game, just moving my units around, and I will admit, I really suck at these games. I absolutely love them, but I do. I think Supreme Commander 2, because I think it was a more casual game, I think I was actually better at that one out of all of them. But yeah.
So with that LOD system, that's where you have a highly detailed unit model, and you also create low detailed ones for when you're zoomed out far away, you see a lower quality model, and then you can render more of them on the screen. That's the point of that, right?
Yeah, and back in the day, you used to have to do it by hand. So you would model the big one, and you may even have 5 or 6 different levels of LODs. And you'd have to do them each by hand, right? So this one, let's just grab a number. Let's say this one's 5,000 polygons. The lowest one's going to be 30 polygons. Then you'll have another one that's 150, another one's 300. So you have all these levels, but trying to make them look and keep their silhouette the same as the biggest one is always a challenge. And I think that's nowadays in games, you actually have decimation tools that will kind of do it almost automatically. So a lot of times you create this big unit, and a lot of game engines will actually just do it automatically now. So that work, there was a lot of, if I remember doing the production on Supreme Commander and Forged Alliance, everything was still hand built, right? You're hitting with a hammer, whereas nowadays the games are so much bigger because there's so many tools that you can automate and do procedural kind of approaches to things. Whereas back then it was just, you've got, I remember people I remember on the game, if you changed the terrain, in some cases you had a tool that would drop all the trees back down to the terrain where you changed it, but it always didn't work. So some trees would be kind of sticking out, some of them actually wouldn't be on the ground. So a lot of the artists would have to go in and hand move things all the way down and get them all lined up again. And then 5 days later, you're doing a play test, and oh, this doesn't feel right here. Especially if it's in a multiplayer game, we've got to move that, and then you got to do the trees all again. And any props or anything that sits on the surface, you've got to go and hand tweak them. And again, nowadays in a lot of games, you move the terrain and everything just automatically goes, oh, there's a collision detection there, I'll just move myself up.
Yeah, but that was a decision that was made, wasn't it, to hand code a new engine for the game? We could have used I say we, I feel like I'm part of it. You guys could have used an off-the-shelf engine. I think they were probably in their infancy back then, but
Yeah,
they
they
did
were.
exist.
There really wasn't. You couldn't use Unreal. Unreal was there. Unreal. There was no way. I think there was talk about it for like Supreme Commander 2, but there was no way you could utilize that game engine for what we were doing. They were really good for those that the Unreal Engine at that point. Was kind of a third person, even a first person shooter type game. It was really great for. And again, I think that just goes to the way the LOD systems work.
Hmm.
It just that game. I think the engines have changed now, where yeah, you can do an RTS in it, but again, when you have like hundreds and hundreds of units on a screen, especially once we went to Supreme Commander 2, we were using flow fields for units, so they actually looked like they were naturally moving around. Yeah, that stuff, those engines just couldn't do it. And I think also there's, Chris Taylor comes from a programming background, and the strength of GPG, there were some great engineers on there. A lot of that, a lot of game engineers, I think now people have changed their tune, but a lot of it did back then is that they kind of want to build it for themselves, right? Like that's the joy of staying at a studio like that, is that they get to build and handcraft stuff themselves. I think sometimes there's not much as joy in taking something that's already done. Again, I think if you're a smaller studio, you can get a lot of traction using Unity and Unreal. But it's also, as a studio, you decide whether you're kind of a tech company, or a game company. And I think GPG kind of straddled the line on both of it. I think it liked its technical prowess, and it also enjoyed its great detail to game design and balance as well. I think that's I think that's I think the game balance kind of took the front seat there as well with that. I think that was really important to Chris, is to make sure things felt balanced.
Yeah.
Even for single player, but especially even multiplayer games.
So, but it does sound like now that your role was more of a managerial role and less of a artist.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think for that it was mainly in the managing it again. Doing more of the production work on there. But again, you always Supreme Commander 2, I actually did. They had the unit HUDs. We wanted to have little talking heads in the units this time. I think previously in previous games they were just still images. And in that game, we wanted to have them talking, and I costed it out, and it was going to be way too much money. And I said, as a producer, I rarely jump in to do artwork, but on this game here, I go, look, I kind of know how to do this, because I can write some scripts to do this. So I actually used a language parser, and I made all the mouth shapes for the characters, and I did some compositing. So at night, because as a producer, I'd work during the day, and then at night before I went home, I would get all these mouth shapes together. I'd get all the audio, and I'd run all my scripts. And in the morning, I'd come back and I'd actually have all the stuff rendered and put together. And then I'd throw it in the game. And so we did. I think I went through hundreds and hundreds of those. And I just kind of did it casually in the background, while not letting it get into my work day. But that is kind of one of those things that for producers, you don't want to get into the line of fire in the game, because if you actually do something that's good, you'll get sucked into the game, and suddenly you'll be mission critical for the success of that game. So yeah, I think for me, if I was doing stuff, I always kind of kept to the cinematic side, doing rendering, things like that, and helping out the team, because it was always not frontline stuff. It was always off to the side, and if it failed, then I'm like, okay, then we can get other people in there. So I found like most of the stuff that I was really involved in the art side was in the cinematic stuff, and helping that group out.
Cool. Okay. And did you play the game much?
I did, yeah. I think on any game that you're working on, you'll always play the game, a fair amount.
And is it you're playing it as part of your role to like make sure it's going okay, or do you play it for love?
Yeah, you definitely will play it. I think especially, as an art manager, playing it with an eye for the art. Again, sometimes you see a seam here and there. I have a superpower in game testing, which is I can fall out of any game world. I don't know why. I still do it to this day. As I'm going around, I can always find a seam in the world and squeeze my character through there, and I fall out, and I can bug it. And so I've always been able to do that. going against a mountain or something like that. Like I ride a unit against a mountain and boop, it disappears. I'm like, oh, there it is. I found it again. And I
Excellent.
swear on every single game I've done that. Even when I play, AAA games, I'm like, oh, here I am falling out of the world. I remember there was a game, Dead Rising, and it was actually really cool. I fell out of a window in this Dead Rising game, or by a window, and I fell into a dead game world. And so it's just, Dead Rising is all these zombies, and there's all these zombies outside, and my character was like, I could just roam freely, but the rest of the game AI was all dead. And I remember like, oh, that was amazing that I was able to find a bug like that in a shipped game.
Yeah. I was wondering what sort of art projects there were. We've covered there was the trailer and there was the UI art, but I imagine there's also the units and the
Yep.
map textures.
Yeah.
Were these all separate teams of people?
Yeah, generally they were. Some of the unit guys could also do maps as well. So the UI was really that is like a completely separate team. The guys using the units, like we had some really good generalist artists there. So some of the artists would do concepts, and then once they were finished their concept, they would jump on to doing unit designs. But sometimes you had people who were just really good concept people, and who would pass those off to the modelers. But generally, a lot of the people would do a concept. It would get signed off on by Chris and the designers, and then then it would move to the modeling stage where you get that model done, and then hand that off to the game designers for implementation of the game. And that for me is the beauty about Supreme Commander is that it was a kind of game design where you could, I don't know if you've heard the term gray boxing, so
They've been saying white boxing.
white boxing, gray boxing.
In
I think
the
you can
other
call it.
interview.
You can call it. But
Yeah,
I
but
think for us, you don't have to have a unit in there. You can have a box, that can have a turret on top, and so you don't have to have the beauty of that game is you don't have to have final artwork in there for a long time. Unless you're going to show it to the press, unless you're going to take a D3 and do a demo or something like that, you could actually, then you could live in that game and play it, but there's no finished units, and it's still fun, So that's a lot of games when they don't have final artwork in them. They're not fun. You can't see what the game's going to be. This game here, you can go, this is a giant walking spider, boom, it kind of has these weapons on it. You can kind of fake in the weapons fairly easily with them, and then once you get the final art, then it's just like gravy on it. You're like, oh wow, yeah, that's amazing.
yeah. So the process for the units then, so a concept. So what happens before the concept art? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's game designs, there's units. They're like, okay, we want so many infantry units here, we want some long range units here. So again, it kind of starts with the balance, of the game. And I'm coming at it from an art thing, so I kind of pull a few things out of my ass here about how it's done. The designers can do it, but usually you have unit types, and you're like, okay, we need so many unit types, and so that's where the artists will come in and they'll do a whole bunch of different concepts. With sometimes they'll just make up their own weaponry on it, and as they go along, the designers will look at them and go, yeah, that actually is a great long range unit there. Let's bring that one and get it to the modeling stage. And so there is kind of a sign off process that you have there, but it really just starts with, we need X amount of these type of units.
Yeah. Did they give you like a brief of a unit? Like, this is a tank, but it's a really heavy one and it's like super strong.
Yeah.
This is another tank and it's really fast but kind of weak.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, on the other guy, I remember on Supreme Commander 2, Chris had, because I think, the game always has sort of these experimentals. I remember Chris would just come up with like lists and lists of crazy experimentals. I think they had like one that would like suck in units and chop them all up. And yeah, he just had a description like that. And then we're like, okay. And then we do a concept for it and we take it back to him and he'd be like, yep, good. Let's move to the modeling stage. And, some of the units, would have abilities on them that would require a lot more programming. So again, you kind of get in like, here's the gist of what they do. But then, sometimes it might take a month or two to actually get all their functionality in there before you can actually see in the game, is it actually even fun, right? So it is still a process of, testing these things out. And, sometimes things aren't as fun, as you thought they would be. So,
That sounds like such a rewarding and magical process to start off with a white boxed unit and just see it gradually come to life, first with the model and then with new abilities, and just over time, just it getting filled in. And one day you see the finished thing, and it sounds really fun.
yeah. Yeah, it is. There is something. I mean, that's why I've been making games for over 30 years, and I think there is always something like that of, even when I was a content person making artwork, you know, even though you make it, the minute you see it in the game, you see it in the context of a game, it changes everything, right? Like, even if you're making something even as sublime as a desk, but the character picks something up off that desk, you're like, wow, I created part of this virtual reality world. And yeah, I think I still get excited when I see, even for the latest projects that I'm on, when I see final artwork and and gameplay happening together, it's always magical, right? I used to get really making. It used to be when E3 would be the big conference, and for years and years that would be it. You'd always shoot towards that, like, hey, we're gonna have a kick-ass demo at E3, and putting that demo together, like, it was just tons of late nights and screaming and everything else. But once you got that demo together, you're like, oh man, this is going to be great. You get to take it to E3, and they build up excitement, and reviewers are like, oh wow, this is going to be an amazing game coming out. I think, again, like Supreme Commander, when they did their demo down there was just so much buzz around it. And you can
Reward.
see, yeah, you can see, I think sometimes when you're working on games, you can see, okay, we got a hit in our hands. But once the game goes out and it really starts creating a buzz, then you're like, wow, okay, yeah, this is like, this is
Goosebumps.
it. Yeah, yeah. My wife, my wife's not a gamer, but she remembers one time we were in Seattle. I think we were just at a mall or something like that, and some guys were down there, and they found out that I worked on Supreme Commander, and they were just kind of going gaga at that point. She didn't understand it, and I go, oh, you won't understand this. Like, you gotta understand, like, people who play these games, I go, they're so hardcore. The fans are just, you know. And again, I think even on some of the games, we've hired people who were modders before at Gas Power for Forge Alliance. We had actually hired some modders on, to help build the next game, and that just goes to the strength of how people are fans. And
Wow.
I think you'll find that in a lot of gaming companies, that a lot of people who get the games were actually modders, right? They're like, hey, I took your game engine and I modded it and I did some amazing things with it, and they're like, wow, we don't really have to onboard you that much into our company. You already know our game engine, so come on in.
So, any more specificity on that? Was that a modder of Supcom 1 got hired for Supcom 2? Something like that?
Yeah, yeah. I'm
And
trying to, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember the name. I'd have to go and look up and make sure I've actually got the right guy. But yeah, maybe I can email that to you and see. There's a lot of people that came through the door, and surprised, that was actually quite a few years ago. And I think if you worked in the game industry, you know you do so many projects now. So yeah, I'm kind of digging into my memory bank.
yeah, no,
On
of
these ones here,
course. Do you
but
remember, was it like a unit mod and the guy had been making his own units, or was it?
I, I think he had been making his own units. Yeah, I don't think it was just because there was a lot of people that were making their own maps, because the maps were pretty easy, right? But I think the units were, if someone actually had created units, and I think they had done some of their own balancing as well. So
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, were there any other art projects besides what I said before? The unit models, the maps, the UI, and the cinematics. Is that the art projects?
Let me think. I mean, there's the animation, like the units. So the units themselves need rigs on them, right? And so you'll have someone, especially like those any of the walking units are going to have rigs for their legs. So you'll have you know some of the character artists. So some of our character riggers, would also do some of the character rigs for the cinematics, and also do some of the rigs for the units as well. And again, for a game like that, the rigs aren't terrifically complicated. As you get into more of a game that has humanoid type things where you're going to have arms and legs, those kind of games you have more character artists on. A game like Space Siege, for instance. But yeah, you're still going to have people doing that kind of work. Sometimes that's the modelers, but doing those kind of rigs is actually a real specialty in the industry. So most companies will have a character art team. Some companies will have like a character tech art team who will actually just, all they'll do is because they have to do the rigging and then they have to do the weighting as well. Especially for some units that have things that unfold and then legs and things like that pop out, right? It's
Yeah, and the buildings are animated too as they
yeah.
upgrade and
Mhm.
as they're working.
Yep.
I
And
was
you
just
also have an effects art department as well.
right for the
Yep.
explosions and
Yep.
the particle effects and
Yep.
ambient stuff like
Yep.
clouds. Yeah, so that's an interesting skill. I've always been interested in particle effects.
Yeah.
I'd be interested actually in knowing more about the process of how they make that. Like, how do you make an explosion? Like, let's say it's a blue fireball. How do they start by draw? How does it work?
Yeah, I think I don't have a ton of experience in a lot of those effects, but usually sometimes you're creating um, textures or sometimes even animated textures on cards and then kind of overlaying them and using different things like additive and subtractive to get different looks on them. But that is a real specific type of wizardry. Usually, and if I recall at GPT, there was a special program that they worked in,
Yeah.
for that. And guy Gordon Duclos was managing that, and he had a real technical background, so he was able to get in there because it certainly wasn't an easy tool to just have someone come in off the street. You kind of had to be kind of a tech artist to get in there and do that work, especially for things like the nuclear explosions and things like that. Those are really big effects. And also effects, if not done correctly, will bring the game right to its knees, because you've got something that's spitting off a ton of effects. Nowadays you've got, particle effects and volumetric effects. Back then you had to cheat it all, right? Everything was cheated.
I find that very interesting because the sort of person that can uh, pull off that project, they have to be artistically inclined. They have to be able to do like the modeling and use all the tools, but they also have to consider performance and they have to
Yep.
get all of that right. And that sounds like a really rare subset of humans in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I think every company's going to have, their effects department, but effects artists, like really good effects artists, are really rare. And so companies are always on the hunt for them. It's just like rendering engineers; companies are always on the hunt for them. And because not that many people go in, because like you say, right, you kind of have to be, bit technical and bit artistic. Again, a lot of people are either, really good at the engineering side, not so good on the art side. They're good at making shaders and stuff like that. Like I can make metal and water and that, but
Right.
kind of like, can you make water that looks like it has kelp on the top of it, right? Suddenly you start getting into more of the artistic vision of, how do you fool someone's eye to seeing something that they don't? And yeah, I think there is, then on top of it, and I think, Supreme Commander, the first two, they didn't really have to worry about lighting too much. The lighting was kind of flat throughout the whole thing, so the difference is nowadays a lot of companies are going to have, lighting artists, lighting departments as well. So back then we didn't have like a lighting group. That was just, there was any lighting that was just done by like one person on the team.
Yeah, well, how would that be different today? Like if you're building Supreme Commander today and there was a lighting department, what would they do?
Because if you're building it today, like even on Supreme Commander 2, we actually started using, like the environment actually had big mountains and things like that in it. So you could actually put some interesting lighting on it. And you'd actually use several lights to kind of bounce shadows off, and the units could be in shadows. That game engine, they rewrote the entire lighting engine as well. So we could actually do, bake in some global illumination. So you could actually get these really rich textures. So yeah, I think for any kind of RTS game nowadays, you just have more memory, more space. So you can have units that are self-shadowing, that are reflective and reflecting all the units around them. Yeah, you can kind of go to town right now, and a lot of those limitations are gone. And I've seen a number of other new RTS games. I think like some of the sort of sad to say. I think like one of the last one was like World of Goo. It was another RTS game that I played. Was it World of Goo or Grey Goo? I think it was. I have to check my Steam, but I think that was the title of it, and it looked pretty amazing. And again, even like XCOM and games like that, they're kind of taking it to the next level where they have some really great lighting and really great environments. I still think Supcom still had that massive scale where you zoom the camera way back to see the world. I think some of the guys from GPG went off, and they made Planetary Annihilation. I don't know if you've seen that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they kind of took that concept a step further. You zoomed out and you're off and you could see a planet. That was the same engineer that was on Supcom.
Mavo.
Yep. And so that was also a lot of the same art team as well. So they just kind of took that and concept and took it a step further.
A very different art style, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think also using that art style, they were able to keep the memory constraints down. That was still in the years of PCs just hadn't made that leap quite yet to like the supercomputers that they are now.
Yeah.
I think when AMD, it almost seemed like when I went to work at NVIDIA, that was like the next generation of graphics cards where suddenly things could look just like they did on consoles and run really well. And then, everything was just improved exponentially, year after year. And now you've got games with ray tracing on them, right? So, if I made an RTS game, I'd probably have ray tracing on it and, units going through puddles. Like, it'll be interesting to see if, a company like Relic makes another Company of Heroes. And, I know they're working on Age of Empires, but if they make another Company of Heroes, you would imagine it would have all those bells and whistles in it. One would hope, right?
I don't actually know what ray tracing adds.
So ray tracing adds, it adds really good reflections. So, you think if you have a metal car and a puddle, and an explosion happens, way over here, another explosion happens way over here, you're going to see these reflections in there. You're also going to see like explosions lighting other explosions and that. So you get this real, like ray tracing is you're just firing off a zillion rays and doing all those calculations. And this makes the calculations, it just does it really fast because now they're able to do that in real time if you have the right graphics cards. I suspect.
And what if you don't have the right graphics card? Then what happens?
Then the setting, all that reflection stuff will get turned off.
Yeah.
What'll be interesting is no game has come out that has said you must have ray tracing on yet. And so really with the stuff you can do with ray tracing, they're only using just a component of it right now. And that like I say, that's just like reflections and some lighting and stuff like that. It'll be interesting, if the next generation of consoles, Xbox and PlayStation 5, if they can do ray tracing on that, then they can make the whole game do all this great ray tracing stuff. So it'll be interesting to see who really takes advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're finding in the industry is everything's moving so fast. The technology is moving so fast. It's interesting. I don't know if you saw that last Unreal demo that was just the girl going up through this canyon, and it just looked like hyper realistic. It just looked amazing, and it was still a demo, a tech demo.
Sorry, which what demo was it for?
It's an Unreal demo for the next.
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
You did see that, yeah. I mean, it just looks amazing, but it's almost beyond reach of what any game studio can they can do. Because if you look at that level, you're like, well, that's a year's worth of work, and that's maybe 20 minutes of gameplay. Now, big games are like people want 40 hours worth of games, so now you have to extrapolate and go, well, how do you build that without costing like $1 billion? And so that's where we're at right now, is that we built all this great technology, but we just don't have the resources to actually make these games out of it. because a lot of that stuff would have to be created procedurally, and a lot of procedural games, like, I played what was the oh my gosh, trying to remember the game that came out where you can travel to all these different planets in the universe.
No Man's Sky.
No Man's Sky, yeah. And so that's all procedurally built, right?
Yep.
It's a super fun game, but after several planets, you start to see, oh, okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here, right? Like everything kind of still looks the same, the stylized stuff. But to make a game like they're showing in that demo, it's very unique. And what happens if you want to have like a forest area as well? It's really hard to do that stuff procedurally. So everything kind of just stops at that point, going, okay, well, no one really has the money or the time to actually spend on that right now. So yeah, the technology has got ahead of how we make games. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where we go from there.
I attended a LucasArts presentation back when Xbox 360 came out, and I remember they were saying that they had like 40 times more power on the console, but they didn't have 40 times more budget to make their game. So using the full capabilities of the engine wasn't really possible, but I guess it did make making normal games much cheaper, because you didn't have to refine everything and super optimize everything. The other approach they were taking is they were making engines that could work across multiple games, and in that way they could use a bit more of the spend a bit more money on it than just for one game.
Right, and that's what EA does with Frostbite. They have like one game engine. They use it on multiple games. I think game engines like Unreal and then Unity, they also move the industry forward. So people they can spend less time creating a rendering a solution, and they can just focus on making a great game and a great looking game. Really, it's just about content creation. And with the vast amount of outsourcing studios out there, if you look at all the outsourcing studios, you look on their credits and they just got like every major publisher on them. So everybody's creating content out there, and I think that's the thing. Still trying to figure out how you create content quicker. And
so how did you create content for Supcom, like just a map texture? Let's say it's a grass texture. How does that process happen?
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff is just done in it's done in Photoshop, for that. And you can make, they were making height maps in Photoshop, and height maps are just, most artists understand them pretty quickly, right? They're your grayscale maps that you just import into the game engine. And I think I actually had made one or two myself when I was there, just fooling around getting into the game engine. And that was the thing they wanted to expose to people, so they knew that fans would create their own maps to play on. And and I think that I think Chris is just, he's such a gamer, and he thinks like a gamer, and I think he likes the idea that his games have long legs, which kind of goes to the point that you guys are still playing this game,
right?
Again, make the game, it's interesting because publishers don't necessarily want to make the game moddable, because they want to be able to sell you content. A great game designer just wants to give you the game and say, look, go out and enjoy this, right? And make it part of what you want to have. And I can see it from both angles. Again, most companies now, they don't really want people to mod the game so much, because they want to be able to sell you stuff from their marketplace to be able to put it into the game. So
yeah, but with the map texture, I was talking about the actual grass textures themselves. Like, how do you make a new repeating texture?
Yeah, there's actually a bunch of programs you can use out there. I can't remember which one they were using with Spring Commander, but yeah, there's a bunch of programs you can actually make a nice square texture and then see it repeating. And I used to do this back in the Sega Genesis days. You would make a grass texture for a sports stadium, and it would have to tile. And so most artists get really good at doing that. And some of them, even if you don't have these programs, can do them in Photoshop, and just Photoshop can do a tiling thing for you, so you can actually see, oh, does it look like there's seams in it? Do you get this weird pattern?
But what about the the actual original image? Was it a photo or is it something hand drawn?
Usually, I think usually you're going to find someone doing something hand drawn. Usually, if you're using a photo, it's going to have too much noise in it, and then again, it's going to get squished down in size, and yeah, you're going to end up editing it. So it's usually better. Any of these artists can just do this stuff by hand. Again, nowadays, nowadays is really different, right? Because you got photogrammetry. You can take a drone over rocks and grass and take the texture and then convert that into a 3D model. So again, what you do nowadays isn't what you did back then. Nowadays you would use Substance Painter, which is the program that I think everybody's using right now and making games right now, and that will just make a nice tileable texture for you. It's a node-based program where you can start doing base textures like, hey, I kind of want grass, but I want grass with dirt in it, and then I want grass with dirt and rocks, and you just start plugging it in and it makes it for you. Whereas back in the day, again, you had to do it by hand, and again, you're just dealing with a square that's going to tile. So yeah.
And the Substance, does that run at runtime? It does all that stuff, or do you bake it so that you end up with
bake that in, yeah.
So you end up with like a texture image and a normal map, and it's just normal after
that.
that.
And it pushes them all out. Once you do one, that it can send everything out. But great, there's a great trial versions of that program, and yeah, it's fun. You can get lost in it though. Like you get in there, you start creating a dirt texture, and then it's kind of like going onto Google. You find yourself like 8 hours later, you're like, wow, I'm still here creating dirt. It's just yeah, I mean, yeah. So being in the industry and watching where these programs come from, it's kind of hard. You're kind of like, wow, I wish I had that one. I was working on this game, but you realize you're like, yeah, it's just going to keep getting better and better. And then a lot of people right now are using another program called Houdini, which again is super hard to learn. It's like a very script oriented 3D program. They used to use, they still do use it for movies a lot, but now it's starting to get into the game world, and yeah, it's like it just never ends for people, right? It's just always a learning process. And I think if you start out with as an artist in the industry, and you don't keep up, you'll find yourself just lost to time, right? You'll you just can't keep up. It's probably why I moved into a management role. I don't have to learn all the software programs. I can just make sure other people have access to learn them as well.
Makes sense. So do you think all the decals on the maps, are they all hand drawn as well? Like they have like the little rivulets and all the detail on the mountains, the tiny little cracks, basically. Is that all hand drawn stuff?
Yeah. Most of the artists there were a lot of them are really good speed painters, and so for them doing textures like that is that's just second nature to them.
Speed painter, is it like with a paintbrush?
No, when they're doing concepts, right? Like if you look at it from a distance, you're like, oh my god, it's a spaceship and there's a big planet behind it. But as you zoom in, you realize it's just a swash of white, and this is just a a splash of yellow here, and it's almost like an abstract painting when you zoom in, and it's kind of like it's like an optical illusion. They kind of fool your brain into seeing something way more than what's actually there, and because your brain is really good at just filling in the blanks, and that's how a lot of these artists do in the industry. Like, it's amazing how fast they can do these paintings, like again of a unit or of a background, just to get an idea, to feel of it. And for them doing textures of mountains and stuff like that, that's the easy stuff for them.
That's interesting. But the those I think the decals have normal maps. Can't actually remember if they do, but I was just wondering if they actually model it in 3D and then bake that stuff.
I'm trying to remember with the normal maps. It's a great question on that one, and I think, yeah, I mean, because that was kind of at the beginning of the normal maps, and I remember with a lot of it, I think they were still creating a lot of them just like bump maps, where they're just kind of creating like a bump map, in the background. I can't remember. Does Supreme Commander have normal maps? I don't recall it having. I thought maybe on Forge Alliance, I think we might have gone to it.
Yeah, I don't remember.
It seems to me that might have been too early. It might have been we just might have been doing bump maps.
Right. They
And
definitely have normal maps in the game. I just don't know if it's for decals.
yeah, I think maybe just on Forge Alliance they might have had the decals because I think it was a brand new. It was a kind of a brand new thing at that point. And yeah, to do those, and I think in the normal maps we were using them on Space Age at that point, but I think yeah, it was really easy to do like hard surface stuff where you could model, you know, uh, you could do a model of like machinery for a wall and things like that, and kind of bump it out and create a normal map from that. And with the lighting changes on it, it would actually look kind of cool. But if you look at the normal maps from way back then, things don't seem to jut out very much, right? But it still made it look so much better than it used to. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'd have to go back. I don't recall us using it on the original game, but maybe on Forged Alliance.
Yeah. And with the so what about the themes of the maps? There's kind of like a red deserty theme, there is a deserty theme, there's a tropical theme, there's a forest
Mhm.
theme, there's lots of different themes. How did the all that come about?
Yeah, I think that was as I recall, I don't think it was tied to the storyline so much. I think it was more just let's make some cool looking maps here that we can. I don't think that came from a storyline that I ever saw that was like, hey, let's create this as a tropical world that they come from.
Yeah.
I think it was hard back then to kind of create these sort of really alien-esque type worlds at that point. I don't think they wanted to go and push it that far.
So did
Even
those ideas come from you, or was that the team, or how did
yeah, that was just the team. I think they were just kind of saying, what could look good on these maps.
yeah, and
Yeah,
once again, would they like do the concept art and then bring it
yeah,
and
those ones there didn't need a lot of concept art. Once we got to Spring Commander 2, we actually went to really custom maps. So we had one that had a giant well with these ramps and things like that on it. So we actually need really detailed concepts for those, but for the not so much for the original maps. I think it was more just make it look good.
what about the faction design? So someone at some point decided that the UEF would be kind of squares and Aeon would be circles and Cybran would be triangles. And I don't know what Seraphim are meant to be.
Yeah. I remember. I think it was more just like they're glossy,
Yeah.
make them shiny.
Well,
I remember when they came back with the concept of the Seraphim, they're like, it was really about the shader that they had. Hey, look, this looks like chrome.
yeah.
But yeah, I think for the designs, that was a little bit before my time when I kind of got there maybe about a third of the way through. And I think at that point they kind of had the look really down at that point. And I think that was, there was some artists there, Kevin Punn and Steve Thompson, I think really lent a hand to forming the look of the factions and
So
making them.
you came in a couple of months after the project had started, and that was already in
Yeah.
place.
So a lot of the kind of the original stuff, because I think sometimes a lot of those projects, because they had been coming off of Dungeon Siege. I think the Dungeon Siege 2 game, and so you know they had probably been circling around on this notion of this type of a game for a while. So again, it kind of speaks to sort of the gray box as they get the notion of that game. Sometimes games like that can be a year in development before they actually start doing the content stuff. So yeah, I
Right.
can't remember how long before that it just lived on a design sheet, and lived in the designer and Chris Taylor's head.
Yeah. Okay. And so with the shaders, it's quite a technical, like it's programming, isn't it? It's very technical. What sort of team actually makes that type of asset?
that's between that's between the engineer and the artist. So there's going to be, I remember it was one of the lead artists. I think on Forged Alliance, it was Maureen Thomas, and exceptional artist, and he worked with the engineering team to get that Seraphim shader right. And usually you're going to work with the engineering team so that it can actually be handed off to the artist to tweak. So a lot of times they'll do the original shader stuff, and then they'll pass that off, and the artist can, once it's all set up, the artist can start tweaking dials here and there, and then the engineering team can go back and tweak it a little bit further. If I remember, it was a little bit buggy, until it kind of got into the game. So sometimes
Yeah.
units would just appear black for a while.
That's
But
quite
yeah,
buggy.
yeah. So usually, nowadays for shader stuff, it's like you have a tech art department that will handle that. But back then everybody was kind of a jack of all trades. Again, if you were an artist, you did concepts, you could do modeling, you could do textures. The only thing, the only time there was always a big division was a lot of, sometimes the UI and effects. Effects was really partitioned off from everybody. But sometimes a lead artist and senior artist could jump in on UI stuff as well. Nowadays, these are separate departments, and no one goes in and touches that, right? They're different departments, different producers, different managers managing them now. But back then, you kind of had to know everything. You had to be able to jump in at a moment's notice and just do something different.
Yeah, but at some point, someone was designing these things. Like someone decided that there would be a bloom effect, and that was a piece of work. Someone decided that there would, just there's
Yeah,
probably
you see, you know where that comes from though. You see it, you see the other games come out, so you either read about the tech. A lot of times, a lot of the game artists, I always like them to go down to things like SIGGRAPH or GDC. They'll pick up something that's happening, and a lot of times they'll see it online 2 or 3 years before. And any good artist is going to keep bugging the engineering team to say, "Hey, can we have this? Can we have this?" Until finally they break down. They're like, "Yes, we'll do that," right? And you'll get that extra effect in the game. Again, if for things like bloom and other full screen effects, and that engineers are great when you can get them in. Again, sometimes you need to be able to put them in, with enough time to be able to tweak them. I think with that bloom effect, they were able to get that in. And then I think back then, there's always buzzwords in the industry, right? Because people reviewing your game are going to be like, "Oh yeah, it looks next gen." It's kind of like, what is next gen for that time? It's bloom, it's normal maps. You got to have them in your game somewhere. And marketing people always love to put on the back of the box, right? Like, "Oh yeah, game like fully rendered with normal maps," and people are like, "Wow." But nowadays people are like, "Yeah, whatever." Doesn't, normal maps, okay. Everything. It's kind of like the movies when they went and did. It's hard to impress anybody nowadays with great CG in a movie. It just all looks good, right? You can do anything. And I think even with video games now, I don't know if you've seen like the Last of Us Part 2 just came out, but they've recreated Seattle in this game, and it's just, you're like, "Oh my God, it's just, they've done it. They've just recreated the whole city, an
does it have
apocalyptic.
a chop zone?
Oh yeah, it does. It actually has Capitol Hill, and it's kind of funny. It actually does look exactly like that now. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. You can kind of do, like you say, you can kind of do everything, and then Naughty Dog has a huge team to be able to pull that off.
Cool. All right. What about, shall we talk about the end-to-end process of making a unit? So you have the brief, then the concept art, which I guess gets approved at some point. They sign
Yeah.
off on who signs off on the concept art?
I think that's going to be sort of, Chris was always involved in a lot of that stuff, and I think on both those games. Unfortunately, Alliance, he took a little bit of a step back, and but then the lead designer is always going to sign off on that. But you have an art director, and the art director has the autonomy to make sure all the units look and feel like that faction, and they fit in that game world. So I think if the designer wants something that doesn't fit in, they're going to have a little bit of negotiation on that. But most of the time, the designer's going to say, "Yep, that meets the needs. It meets the size requirements that they have." And again, the turrets all work. And it can fire in the right range as well. And also if it needs to look like it's super powerful, it looks like it's more powerful than this other unit. Like the experimentals need to look really kick-ass compared to just like a little engineering unit that's going to get trashed pretty fast, right? So but then so once that concept signed off, they're going to do a high res version of that model. Do a high res version, get that in the game, see how that plays and looks, and then they're going to do textures for that. Again, export those into the game. Once you have that running, then they'll start on their LODs for that and get all the different LODs in there. And I remember there's times when some of the LODs are just squares. So the minute you pan the camera back, the unit will go bloop and it would just turn into a box, and you're like, okay, the LOD isn't done. And so
the LODs came after the finished model was
signed
off, I guess.
Yeah, generally you'll do that because you kind of want to see what the silhouette of that unit is compared to everything else. So you're gonna want to do your high res version.
Yeah, and no point in making the low res versions until you've got sign off, I guess.
Yeah.
And is that the end? Is that the end of the process?
Well, once you go in there, they're gonna put again, you're gonna have someone do the rigging on that. If it needs rigging, even if it has a turret in that, it needs to be able to turn and shoot. And then the effects artists will go in and they'll do their effects on it. And then, then the audio person's also going to have the audio cues that are going to be put on it as well. And, and again, I'm trying to remember whether the artist may have tagged some of these units so that the sound guys will have some ideas. But like, for instance, like the train is tagged as well. So, hey, I'm on water, I'm on land, so the audio can cue off, right? And but yeah, I try. Am I missing anything on there?
So what you meant by that was that the footsteps when you're on a hard surface make a louder noise than when you're on dirt, that type of thing. And they do visual cues based on that as well because it kicks off a different type of dust or no dust. Cool. And then I guess just bug fixes and refinement after that.
Sometimes the units will go back for revisions. Sometimes they, maybe they just don't look good. Especially when you have a bunch of units, if they look too similar to other ones, they can get lost. So you may want to go in and revise them a bit based on the gameplay. Again, for those kind of games, it's just all about gameplay. And then, then you play around with it, and then the unit gets balanced, and then gets off to QA for testing, and and then these units, the minute you put in a new unit, everything almost needs to be rebalanced again to that new unit. So it kind of keeps going over and over again. But again, in those kind of games, things are signed off, but things are always kind of in flux to the very end. You can still go back to that unit for a variety of reasons and to fix it up, make it. Sometimes the artists are like, oh, I could probably make this look a little more beautiful. The artists are always fighting for a little more time. And especially on a game like that where you're, certain things are time boxed. Like, okay, you have a week for this unit, and you have 2 weeks for this unit, But if you gave an artist 2 weeks, they take 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Otherwise, it would just go forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and budgets and schedules to meet.
Yeah.
So, do you have any interesting stories about working on the Supcom team, which I guess includes the Supreme Commander too?
Yeah, I think I think for Supreme Commander and Forged Alliance, I don't have any interesting anecdotes on there. I think there's something for the other gas powered games where I remember there was a movie that came out. If you're familiar with Dungeon Siege, the Jason Statham was in the movie, and he has a line in it that was like terrifically bad. He goes, I'm gonna gouge evil from its shell.
Gouge evil from its shell.
And I remember it was just such a horrible line, and I remember trying to convince the designer, they're like, can we include that line in every single game we make? and I can't remember, but we got it into a couple of games. I know the Space Siege it's in there. I'm pretty sure Supcom 2 may have it in there. I remember the lead writer was battling me on that, because we were trying to sneak things in there. I think there was a character in Supreme Commander that, I'm gonna have to be careful about this one. She may or may not have looked like Sarah Palin, and I really wanted the line. I think she might have said it, I can see your base from here, and then proceeds to nuke it. And,
Oh,
and I thought it was I thought it was kind of the brilliant thing, but I thought for sure, our publisher was going to see that and say, yeah, no, not going to happen. But, they, I think we had a little more fun with Supreme Commander 2, putting in, goofy lines. But yeah, the gouge evil from its shell, I think, was in almost most of the games there. Be good to see if someone ever gets a video of any of those.
yeah. I never realized that Dungeon Siege was a movie, or maybe I didn't realize that they were
It was
connected.
done by who was the guy's face? His name was Ubu Well, and he makes horrible movies based on video games. That's kind of his MO. And yeah,
Potentially not the way he describes it.
There was actually a Dungeon Siege too. I was actually hoping that there would have been a Supreme Commander movie. That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Chris would have wanted to get a cameo in that. I think also just working with you guys have interviewed Chris, right?
Yeah. Halfway through that.
Halfway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Chris is quite a personality, and so he he usually provides a lot of the hijinks on there, but again, I always had to give a little bit of warning to people getting hired at the studio. I go, okay, the guy who runs the studio, he's a bit of a character here. I love him, but he's
a lot of
you got to
energy.
be okay with him.
Yeah.
He makes some crazy jokes and things like that, but he's he's also super caring guy about the people at the company as well, right? So I think that was I think it just, for me, I always look back at the years at Gas Power Games as very fond memories, especially working on, Supreme Commander, and the team was just, everybody's really excited to work on that. And, we were doing, working on a franchise where you work on 3 titles in a row, you're devoting quite a bit of your life to that. I think that was like most of my, 6 years living in Seattle was spent, doing Supreme Commander related stuff. But I mean, Supreme Commander 2, I do remember us getting, a little beat up about that going down to E3. I think at that point, it was interesting. Before that, Supreme Commander and Forge Alliance, the gaming press was actually really, really great. You make a good game, they would be nice to you. They would, they'd review it critically. It sort of seemed by the time we got to, I guess, what was that be? That would be like around 2010 or something like that. It seemed a lot of game reviewers were kind of more going for the shock value. And so I remember being at E3 for Supreme Commander 2, and then, bloggers and people coming in to interview were just, they just weren't being very nice at all. Even if we were making a game for a casual audience, but they weren't even asking about the game. I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like Chris is just getting hammered here, right? So, and he's a talker, but it can be really deflating in the industry when people are coming in with the sole purpose to try and knock you down a few steps for for making a game that I don't know, they wanted something better, but I think that's I remember for the original Supreme Commander and Forge Alliance, whenever we were showing it off at any of the trade shows, you'd be sitting there talking to the fans forever, and it was just awesome, right? Just talking to people who just loved the game so much.
And you still are. You're talking to me.
Yeah. I know. I think that's awesome. But it was funny when Brad reached out and he was like, "They're still playing." I'm like, "They're still playing it? Can you even play that?" I have it in my Steam library. I'm like, I was actually going to check and see, because I remember there's a place in Steam where you can actually see community and people playing games. I remember you'd actually always go there to see I don't know where
Yeah,
that.
there's still people playing on Steam. There's somewhere
Yeah.
between 500 and 1,000 people playing
Uh-huh.
on that.
And that's
Um,
still.
but lots of people migrate to our community, which is Forge Alliance Forever, where like the Steam version hasn't changed since it's been released because it's the raw game. We've modified ours to with a whole bunch of performance fixes and millions of different things. We made a new campaign for
Ah,
Seraphim, which never existed.
yeah.
We've made all sorts of AI improvements. We've got like 8,000 maps,
Holy
which is
moly.
a lot. We've built
Yeah.
tons of mods, bug fixes, balance fixes.
Uh-huh.
I'll probably put up a slide of all the stuff that we've been doing over there. But it would be great if all of the people on Steam who are watching this could come and join us and help grow our community because
Yes.
we've been improving things for 9 years, and things are pretty good over at Forge Alliance Forever.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'll have to have a look. So I can go there and I can download.
Absolutely, yeah. You'll have to own the game on Steam. That's the
Yeah,
only
I
thing.
got it.
Yeah, and then there's a bit of a process because you have to link it to your account. But after
Yeah.
that, I'll send you some stuff. But yeah, you can come along, hit me up for a game anytime.
Oh, you'll kick my ass on it, but yeah, I'll have to. I'll have to get in a few games first and against the AI and see how I fare. But
You can,
it's funny. I remember working on Supreme Commander 2, and I thought I was actually pretty good at the game. And we released the game, and I would say, I was actually pretty good. I was playing it online for people, and I think for a week I was actually doing good. After that week, I couldn't win one game online against anybody, and people had figured out how to do. It wasn't so much an exploit. They learned they could do a commander rush, and so they'd start the game up and they just walk the commander over to your base and just hit the nuke, right, self-destruct button, and you know they could take you out, and so they could if they could no, they would come over and they would just shoot you and see if they'd live. It would just be like a draw, and if you weren't prepared, you just go nuke, and if they could survive that, then they win the game. And you get a lot. I remember the online player forums were like, hey, I don't play with anybody doing commander rushes, and I don't know whether we released a fix to that or not. I think we might have. It
yeah.
wasn't so much an exploit, but
I
yeah, it
think
was just
you can still do it to some extent. You just need
yeah,
to learn how to counter it and what
yeah,
to do when that happens.
right.
But yeah, it's happened to me as well, but it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I was always the one who I'd always try and race to get a nuke going, and that was always my defeat. It's like I'm gonna get an experimental and a nuke, and then someone just comes over with a swarm of ships and just kills me, right? Because I'm trying to build something too big, too slow.
I think a lot of people would say is that you shouldn't really walk into a game with deciding what you're going to do. You need to react to the actual game and just be
Right?
constantly watching what they're doing to counter whatever they're doing. But
Hmm.
then when you decide how you're going to finish it, you decide based on what they have. Like maybe they'll die really easy this way, or maybe a nuke is a terrible idea at that point of
Right.
the game. So
Well,
that's
that's what we did with the AI on Supreme Commander 2. It actually learned from your gameplay and would adjust. And so that's why the hard mode on that game was actually terrifically hard, because the AI was just so much smarter in that game. So again, I think there's some great stuff in Supreme Commander 2 that could have been great stuff that got folded back into the other game. But again, I think when you go with a new publisher, they want to reach much broader audience. So
that's interesting. So would it remember what it learnt from you next game, or would it just learn again newly every game?
um, I'm trying to remember whether we actually had it stored. I don't think it would. I don't think it would learn. I think it would just learn from that particular game. It would learn what you were doing. It would see what kind of units you were flying over, so it knew how to counter and build like its own amount of units. So it didn't just have like an AI strategy to go and take your base. It would go, oh, you're sending gunships. Good. I'm going to build these things here that don't just counter your gunships. I'm going to have my own strategy now to go and
Oh,
get you.
okay. So actually making decisions in
Yeah.
reaction to intel rather than just following the
Yeah.
same steps all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's why I always found that in that game was really important to get rid of the, shoot down the spy planes as fast as you can before they find your base.
exactly. Were there any critical decisions that were made, good or bad, that you just felt had like a big change in the outcome of the games by you or just by anyone?
Supreme Commander 2, we went and we did a console version. It was reasonably partitioned off. I think the players kind of blamed the main game for being like, oh, you guys watered it down to make a console version. But actually, that wasn't the case. I think it was just, I don't know if the game was so much watered down, but it was more, trying to make it appeal to a broader audience. Again, I think, yeah, my feelings on that is that, yeah, just go back, just try to get the original audience. And, again, I think publishers, you can't fault them. They want to make more money. They want to sell, bigger games, and they want to kind of have this experience. And so, yeah, I think there were some decisions made there that, I can't just blame the publisher. I think we could have pushed back harder on that. But yeah, I think that game in particular probably could have kept the franchise, alive today. Again, if you do a really good version like that, then another publisher will pick it up and do versions of it, right? Like even old games that, you know, Warhammer games. Again, if the game, can make enough money for a publisher, to keep that license alive, they'll keep doing it. But I think most people want to make so much money on a game title now, and that's not an indie game. So it's almost like if an indie game developer could make that game, they could make it for the budget that would make enough money from it. But the problem with a lot of the RTS games is that you do have very limited audience. So how many sales you're going to make, and so most people do want, unless you're an indie game developer, you kind of want to go for the big, heavy hitting audience, right?
Yeah,
Everybody wants to be the next PUBG or Fortnite.
that's right. I think
Yeah.
Jeremy was saying that with a good RTS, you might sell 1 million copies, which to an indie studio is amazing, but to a big studio, that's not much.
Right. Yeah. If you can get like a team of 20 people, it's easy to, it's easy to be profitable. And again, I think if everybody goes in with their eyes open, going, hey, this may not make us, $1 million each every year, but we're gonna get paid well, and we're gonna keep the lights on. And I think that's what a lot of indie studios have. I think the problem with Gas Powered is that it did grow quite big. I think at one point it had like almost three full teams working on games at that point. And the problem with an indie game developer, that once one game developer pulls the game title on you, you're trying to chase down other ones. And I think, what ended up happening is that around that sort of 2008 timeframe, if you remember, the economy tanked in the US. So it was just, it was just kind of bad luck, but it was still, GPG was able to keep going for a number of years with pretty big teams, sizable staff. But it's kind of the fate of a lot of the indie studios that, they, you're always trying to chase that next big project where, if you're a smaller studio, but even if you're a smaller studio, even some of these small studios, like 30 people, if you push out a title that's not going to make you money for the next year, and you lose some key staff, so it can be difficult.
Do you think there's any appetite for publishers to sponsor indie RTS?
Yeah, I think there are, because a lot of publishers have little branches of people that do RTS games. Again, you kind of look at, you look at it on Steam and all that, and even on other publishers. Like some of them, like even like EA won't publish them like an EA game. They'll almost have like another brand where they publish these games. But yeah, there is still a lot of funding for these game titles, because it's hard for people to know what's going to be the next big thing. As long as you're getting a lot of executives that have been making games forever, they kind of lose touch with. I think there's games like Fortnite. A lot of people just didn't see it when the original game came out. They were like, oh, I don't get it. It's a fort building game. What gives? And then one tiny tweak to that game made it like one of the biggest selling things ever. And if you can be the guy putting money into indie games. Again, who's to say an RTS game could be the next big game, right? A lot of those games are kind of RTS-y in nature, right? You're building stuff, you're getting resources and stuff like that. So, if you make an accessible RTS, or even a hardcore one, again, a lot of people have been playing, a lot of these, Clash of Clans on their phones, and really they are. I call them RTSs, right? They're strategy games, and so everybody's been trained up on their phones on how to play RTS games, and so I think there is a huge audience for that. That again, I'd kind of watch. It'd be interesting to see when Relic comes out with their Age of Empires. Like that'll be sort of the first Age of Empires in a long time. Or even if there's another Total War, it'd be really interesting to see. Do they expand? Do they expand those audiences because people find those games more palatable now because they've been playing them and they've been having a lot of fun? Like Clash of Clans was like a monster hit, right? And again, it's a casual RTS to a degree, right? And there's a ton of these other games like, it's like Camelot, like Zynga games and Kaboom games and things like that, right? They all have kind of the essence. A lot of them are just time gated. But if you remember, that was the whole thing. Like with Spring Banner, you're building something and you're waiting, like, oh, build, hurry up. It's the same thing with all these time gating games, except they just gave you the option of, hey, you can give us $5 and we'll build this for you right now, right? Again, you look at a game like Spring Commander, you could make it say, hey, you want to finish this building? Hey, give us $5, right? I'm surprised someone hasn't monetized that game, but I mean, I don't necessarily think you need to do that, but I do think, yeah, there you go. But I do think there's definitely publishers out there. There's a lot of publishers, scouring. Like GDC has a huge indie game area, right? There's just tons of indie games, hundreds of them, and it's all these publishers and guys in suits walking around playing games and looking for the next thing they want to sponsor, right? And plus it's low risk for them, right? Because they're not, if you're going to sponsor a AAA game, you're going to spend millions and millions of dollars. With an indie game, it's like your risk is like, okay, well, we spend a couple of $1 million, doesn't go anywhere. Well, not gonna affect our stock price, again. But if it does, it's kind of like the movie industry, right? Where you have, like Blair Witch, it's a movie that's filmed on like a camera, right? But costs like probably like $100,000 to make, and this thing just makes a bazillion dollars, and then suddenly everybody's making these horror movies with cameras, right? And but yeah, if you're the first person to kind of come up with a more ingenious thing, then
yeah. So I know for a fact that there's some people in our community interested in starting their own indie projects, which I guess would just be like self-funded in their spare time type of deals. But I'm more interested in funded with publisher, like real fundings to achieve a project to make it a bit more realistic and actually deliver it.
Publishers love to see demos first before they publish. That's always sort of the catch-22, right? They like to see something that they can kind of play, so they can see in their minds, like, oh, is this something like this other game or something like this, right? It's always really difficult in the industry to pitch an idea. I've rarely seen that happen. Even on the hit games that I've worked on, when I worked at EA, I worked on the snowboarding title SSX. It was arguably a huge game, huge franchise. I remember it just took us forever to pitch the game. Everybody kept turning it down, going, oh, it'll never make any money. No one will play that. No one's interested. Until we actually built a demo, people could actually play it, then the game kind of got its full funding, right? So I think that just kind of holds true that, even if you don't do it to a beautiful way, but as long as you can kind of really get the feel of what you're going to build across.
Which is quite hard to do. Like you were talking before about your grey boxing and how that seems like a very sane way to develop something, but now it almost seems like you need the opposite, where it's just super beautiful for the demo.
But then again, you can actually do it. In some cases, you can do it as a little movie as well. Sometimes you can kind of say, hey, here's sort of an imagined thing of what we're going to build, and here's how we're going to build it, and we have a plan to build it. And I think the main thing that most publishers are going to want to know is like, do you have engineers? So if you have a bunch of engineers, then they're really interested, because that's usually the most difficult people to get together to do that. If you're like, hey, I've got an artist and an audio guy, even though they're really talented, it's really difficult for a publisher to go, oh, how can you guys make games? But if you've got engineers in your back pocket and artists and audio people, then usually for publishers they're going to be interested. But yeah, it's an uphill battle if you just got it on paper. And like I say, it's catch-22. Most of those people that are out on the floor showing their games, trying to get money, have pretty slick looking versions of their game. Some of them, a lot of them were students, and a lot of them are like student projects, right? They're kind of continuations of people they met in school. But yeah, I wish I had, yeah, kind of sunnier view of how it actually works. But yeah, my experience is that maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you'll find something different. But I think for the most part, you're probably going to find it, again, just a real uphill battle, unless you're a super slick salesman. And,
how would you even get in touch with them? For those of us who can't actually make it to GDC, how would you get to the right person?
There's usually if you lurk around on LinkedIn, LinkedIn, a lot of these people are really good. Like if you present yourself well and are polite and say, hey, look, if when getting in touch with these people, I would say, hey, I've got a bunch of engineers and we've been modding games for a while, kind of like figure out, really think about like what would sell it to you. You're a bunch of ragtag group of people coming in. What's it going to look like to a guy who's holding the money pot, right? And yeah, I think I've cold contacted people. I had an idea for a game that was a licensed IP, and I contacted someone at Hasbro, and they said no, someone else already has that license and they're already making something similar. But I just cold called the guy on LinkedIn. I just looked up, who's the licensing guy on Hasbro. And
is that a Transformers game?
No, it was. I wanted to make like a Barrel of Monkeys game. But,
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but I think EA had it at the time. But yeah, most of these people are super, super nice. Again, sometimes you may think that they're getting 1,000 calls a day, but they're usually able to see if someone's actually really, again, you've got sort of the Forged Alliance thing, so kind of, it looks like you guys have some cred as well, right? So it's, again, you guys are part of sort of a gaming community. You're not just someone coming in off the street. So
yeah. Plus, like Dota started off as a mod. That type of thing. League of Legends started off as Dota. That's a massive.
Yeah, like I say, like modders are highly respected in the industry as well. So again, like I say, if you're a company and someone has already learned your game engine to know how to put units in, know how to put audio in, know how to balance, I mean, they kind of know your game engine, right? So,
yeah.
They are a really valuable commodity as well. So, I think that's something that you find, I think any, indie publisher, worth their weight would actually kind of know and be able to sort of see through that. But yeah, again, like I say, without a game demo, it's more of an uphill battle.
Yeah. What else do you need besides the demo? Like, I guess some concept art and stuff, but also, I think Jeremy was saying that with the pitches, they had like a whole project plan with dates and deliveries and milestones,
Yeah.
and all budgeted out.
Yeah, Jeremy and I, we work together, and I mean, both of us have the experience that we can put together a full plan. Even in our head, someone asks like, what kind of games like this? We can put it together in our head. And that's kind of like also what publishers will look for is this sane, right? Again, a lot of times they're not going to look for the things that you're going to have in there. They're going to look for the things you don't have in there. Again, do you have an engineer that can do your UI work? Do you have an engineer that can do your, effects stuff like that? Do you have the proper people? If you don't have the proper people, how are you going to get the proper people? Are you in an area where you can get the proper people? So again, I think these people who are doing these fundings and things like that, they kind of know how to poke holes in a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
I used to go around to some companies, independent developers, and I was getting them to do some projects that I was pitching towards another bigger publisher. And, yeah, it was amazing how much stuff they left off. Because I think people tend to leave off stuff because it makes them look better. Like, oh, we look really lean. But a publisher is more interested in like, what don't you have so I can help you out? Again, people, you don't want to be too cocky going in there saying, oh, we know how to do this. It's kind of like you want to be say, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. And so where a publisher like that can come in is they can go, oh, good, thank you for being really honest. Here, we'll fund you for all this stuff, or we'll provide you with this help here. And so, I think for Jeremy, when he's doing his pitches, yes, they can do a lot of the glossy pictures and stuff like that. And I mean, Jeremy and I come from the school of that's just the way we're taught to do it. I'm not going to disagree with him, but I don't necessarily know if you need to have all of that stuff up front. I think Jeremy and those guys are probably going for much bigger fish.
Do you mean are you talking about the concept art, or are you talking about the project plan?
Well, I think for Jeremy, when those guys are going for their publishers, right? If he's talking about, when they're working at games like Planetary Annihilation, right? They're going for much bigger projects, that need much more money, and they had a much bigger team. So again, that's when you kind of need the real glossy, product plan and everything else like that going in, and concept art. Whereas if you're not going to be having such a huge burn of money, you probably don't need all of that, at least up front. The other thing you do is a Kickstarter.
That's true as well. But then
Yep.
now it definitely needs to look pretty.
Yeah, but a lot of Kickstarters are they just have some good concept art up there. But, again, a lot of, some RTS games, I think Goddess, Peter Molyneux's game, I thought that was a Kickstarter, so there's been a number of Kickstarters, especially when you have a limited audience and they're really rabid fans, they're like, sure, I'll kick in $20, like people kicked in how much money for Star Citizen, they still don't have a game. Yeah, you'd be amazed. Kickstarters are a great way to do that, right?
Mm. Okay, so looking forward to the future of RTS, do you think RTS is dead?
I don't. I think it's evolved. Like I think I went back and I talked to you about the mobile games, right? I think it's become. I think RTS has become, again. I think it's become casual. I think the thing that we need to watch is, Relic is putting out an Age of Empires game. That's the one that I'm watching right now because it's the only one I can think of right now. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about like another Total War game, but perhaps they are working on that. But I'd like to see what they're doing, and that'll tell me, are they going for the same audience and with the same mechanics, and that's it, right? And then I'm like, okay, and if the game sells well, then I'm like, okay, there's still a future for that. If they, maybe they're going to change things up, right? And we'll see, whether the designs have changed based on, the new demographics of game players. And yeah, I guess I'm waiting to see what's going to happen there. Because again, I think the RTS just kind of disappeared for a while. I think that was it was fighting an uphill battle with the games, with mobile games, and sort of these casual games kind of stole that market away. Where publishers are like, why should I go for this limited amount of market when I can go for this huge one over here? So,
will there be another Total Annihilation successor one day?
I don't know. I think I'm trying to remember who actually has that license right now.
Square Enix has the Supreme Commander one.
Enix, yeah. Gosh, I don't know. Square. Square's.
I think
the people that I knew at Square are all gone right now. I think who were kind of the biggest champions of that game. So again, I think you need to have someone who goes back in there who is a huge fan of the game, working at Square, to be able to champion that. But they haven't sold that off. Chris hasn't bought it back. And I know Chris. I know he's up to like a new game as well. And but yeah, you never say never, right? I mean, I've seen games from the 1990s have resurfaced, and again, someone's sitting on an old license. So yeah, I think things sort of sometimes come in waves, right? So maybe the RTS is there's just another wave waiting to happen. That's why I say wait for wait for like, let's see what Relic's going to do with their Age of Empires, and let's see if there's going to be another Total War game,
Hmm.
you know, anything like that, and see how well they do. You know, I'd be interested to see whether they increase their audience or whether their audience is decreased. And you know, I know Relic, you know, when they put out their Warhammer game, you know, I don't know how much money it made, but it sort of seems like it just sort of, you know, came and went really fast. And you know, I don't know that whether that was, you know, whether when there wasn't this wide adoption of the game. You know, I had left that game title, you know, well before it shipped, and so yeah, I'm not sure, you know, quite what happened there, but I do think the audience kind of had changed at that point. So
Right. What about how would everything be different using today's tools, processes, and experience? You've already mentioned heaps of different things about how, you know, you would use different tools and how it's much easier. Do you
yeah,
have anything else to add to that?
no, I mean, you know, I can think of the Supreme Commander being, you know, being a damn fine looking game. You know, again, you know, you could zoom right in on your unit. You could probably see the guys inside the Supreme Commander, you know, operating at, you know, you wouldn't need cutscenes that are, they would just be real time in the game engine, right? You know, you would have fluid dynamics. You just put in all the bells and whistles, right? And you know, so the game itself will be, you know, again, so much better. You know, I think on the you know, I think the beauty of those games is that you could have, you know, 4v4, and you know, it'd be interesting to see, could you expand that at all? You know, could you expand the amount of units that you have? You know, I think that's the thing.
That's actually something that we did over at Forge Alliance Forever. You can now have
Uh-huh.
16 players in a game.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Nice.
And we
Nice.
made some changes to the network layer as well to support more players, but also more reliable connectivity.
And did you reduce the amount of units per player?
No.
No. Okay. Wow.
No, because
Awesome.
computers have improved since then, so you couldn't
Yeah.
have your 16 players back then, but you can now. Like we do it all the time, and most of the time it's fine. And I'm starting to think maybe we could add a few more players, but we'll see
Yeah.
how that goes.
Wow. Yeah. You see, you know, and I think that's really exciting. It's just having more players. I think also, you know, I think nowadays, you know, you look at a game like that, you know, even you know, I was even thinking like old games like Supreme Commander, can people play them on, you know, you have new distribution devices like Stadia, you know, can you take a game like Supreme Commander Forge Light, can you stream them now? You know, so again, it'd be really interesting to see some of these game titles like that, you know, you needed a big computer for before, but can you bring them back, and can they be popular on some of our new distribution devices? You know, again, you know, with Stadia, can you play some of these games? You know, kind of, you can have like mouse, you know, mice control, keyboard control in your living room. You know, I use a keyboard and a mouse in my living room with my smart TV. You know, all the time. It's just easier to go search for stuff, and I can use the internet on there, right? So I think that that division between, you know, what's TV, what's your living room, you know, and your office now has all changed, right? You know, so it's, again, you can now play games on a variety of devices. So
Do you have any idea what the uptake of Stadia is? Like, is there lots of users?
no, I don't think so just yet. I don't think there's a lot of buy-in. I keep seeing them try and coerce me in with advertisements saying, "Hey, you know, come and get a free month of Stadia." I haven't gone there yet, but I have. I'm the wrong audience, you know, because I have, you know, I have hundreds of games in my Steam library. You know, I work for Sony, so I got like tons of PlayStation 4 games right now. Like I don't have enough time to play all the games that I have.
Mm.
So, you know, getting another game device is just
Not really the solution that you need.
yeah,
What
yeah.
do you play that you like at the moment?
Yeah, you know, I've been playing a lot of sort of, you know, Sony games, you know, Death Stranding, and you know, I'm just playing The Last of Us Part 2 right now. And you know, and on the PC, you know, I was actually playing through the last Doom game, and you know, so I kind of get some of these games. I you know, playing a lot of indie games. I play games. You know, I don't finish them, and then I go back to them. Like, you know, going back to Firewatch, playing that game. Sometimes I'll see a screenshot and I'm like, that was such a beautiful game. I'm gonna go back and play it because I know I'm only like halfway through. So if I get games like Doom or like Tomb Raider, or some of these sort of first person or third person action adventure, I'll play them all the way through. For some RTS games, I was playing Goddess for a while and GODUS, and then I was playing XCOM, stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah, so I was playing a few of those games, and I was actually thinking of cracking open one of the old Supreme Commander games and seeing how they run. Again, as I go on in years, I'm like, wow, how do these games run? I've got a new graphics card. I bet you they run, pretty fast. But
Yeah, that's right.
I know some of the games I have don't even run anymore. I'm like, oh, they just don't run, and I don't know why. And I haven't debugged them yet, but
No, Supreme Commander still works. If you want, come and join us. We can play like a team game with some other beginner players.
some noobs.
And yeah, and just like casual. Otherwise, you could have a crack at the campaigns there if you just play by yourself. The other thing that we did is we made all the campaign co-op, which isn't in the Steam version, so you can just play all the missions with like a friend, which is social and casual, and you don't get your ass kicked all the time. Were there any ideas that you had that you wanted to put in Supreme Commander that you couldn't?
I think I had ideas for units. Probably, that probably didn't get in. They're probably stupid as well. So I can't quite remember them. Again, usually I'm in a lot of meetings and there's spitballing a lot of ideas, and I'm always one for throwing out stupid ideas, or maybe even something that's stuck. I can never remember if something I have ever sticks or not. I'm never attached to my ideas. I think there's some people that are like, wow, that was my design, I put it in. I guess that's never been my, I don't get a reward off of that. I think for me, the reward has always been making the game and seeing the game finish. Has always been kind of more what I've been interested in. Like, I get more bummed out about a canceled game or game that doesn't ship than I do, about anything else, or any other idea that I have. But I kind of like to influence. So I think wherever I've gone towards things, having design ideas, I have a thing that's probably not a very nice thing to do, but I always try to make sure that my ideas are never seem like they're my ideas. So it's always great that I'll have an idea, someone will start repeating it back to me, I'll go, that's a great idea, I'm glad you thought that up, and then they'll get it in the game, and I'll be like, oh good, okay, good, got that one done.
That's how it works.
Yeah. Well, also in the game, you're hiring, it's tough. Like, everyone has an opinion about art. Also, everybody has an opinion about design. Everybody has an opinion about how the game can be fun. Especially designers always have to run the gamut of QA, and QA will always be coming back. And I always love, I've seen game bugs that are simply, game is not fun. Unit is not fun. And
that's a bit rough.
Oh, it's so rough, right? And then you just demoralize the the designers that have been thinking up. Making something fun is really hard, right? So I've always left a lot of room for designers to do their stuff. For me, it's about like, how can we make this happen quickly so we can get the product to market. And but yeah, it's I always give gameplay a wide berth, and especially on the games that I've produced, is making sure that they've got as much time as possible to do what they need to do, because usually the first time through it's not going to be fun, and so it's such an iterative process that yeah. But I don't know, it'd be interesting to kind of go back and really take a think about, did any of my ideas ever make it into a game besides my gouge evil from its shell.
Yeah.
So,
What about oh yeah, another thing I meant to ask, I forgot to ask this one. Did you manage to find any concept art or early art from
I did not. I have some stuff from Supreme Commander 2, but it's some pre-rendered movie stuff that I think I did a screen capture of something that I did there's some stuff that I was actually putting together, and for those the pre-rendered cutscenes
Yeah,
in
if we
Supreme
could have a
Command.
look at that, that would be
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. I'll send those over to you.
I
And,
think the more endearing stuff would be anything that looks unfinished, where it's
right.
still in progress.
I do have an interesting story. There was so we did Supreme Commander 2, and or was it Supreme Commander? I can't remember. Maybe it was on Forged Alliance. But yeah, when we were working with Square, they had sent us the movie book. I guess there was one of the Terminator movies came out, and I think I forget which one. It was like the third one or something. And Square sent us this art book from the movie, and they said, "Hey, we're really worried that one of the ships in the game, you guys took it from the movie." And so they sent me the art book, and I'm looking through the art book, and I'm like, that's our concept. That was done by Sung. And I'm like, I knew his work. I knew it like the back of my hand, right? And I'm like, that's Sung's work. And I'm like, that's our ship. That's one of our Supcom ships that never went into the game. And then I went back and looked in our folder, and I went, well, hold on. I go, this is like years before the movie came out. I go, and so I called them back up, and I go, no, we didn't take it from them. They took it from us. And I go, you should go after them. And they were like, they never. I don't think they ever actually believed me, because it's like, oh, it's from the movies. I go, you got to understand how they did this. They just saw this piece of artwork somewhere online, and they just nipped it and put it in their art book. But the only thing they did is they took some signature off of it. And yeah, and so yeah, I remember that clearly. But it's funny. So out there, so there's some Terminator. There's a Terminator artwork book that has a Supcom unit in it, and it looked like one of their drop ships. It was,
Well, we need a picture of that.
I know. You know what? You're absolutely right. I absolutely should have taken that. Actually, Son's on my Facebook page. I'm gonna text him and see if he has that. Maybe that was something he'd kept. But
Yeah. Well, that would be fun. What about things to add to a new RTS? If you had any ideas on that, we've had some good suggestions already. Brad was
Mhm.
talking about if buildings could shatter, like in cities, if there was an explosion nearby and they could sort of topple. So, like if there was a building, it would crack and then
Yeah.
fall, and that could actually damage units that it falls on because it's more rendered with physics. We could have like land bridges, we could blow up land bridges, we could have dams, we could blow up dams, we could have a flood
Mhm.
come down. I talked to Jeff as well, the one of the lead engineers,
Yeah.
and he had a cool idea, which was like if you nuke the ocean, it would create a tidal wave, which would then flow back to the beach and wipe out the units. Like that's
Wow.
exciting stuff. Did
Yeah.
you have
I
any
would, I would,
cool ideas?
I'd like to see the an eternal war, which is it'd be just kind of a module of the game where you go in, and it's almost like it's like it's almost like PUBG or something. You just drop in, and you can start building and start producing units and stuff like that. But it is kind of like a PUBG kind of thing, where there's just always a war going on, always a game going on. So it's not, and also the landscape and everything is getting affected by this constant war, right? It's just getting more and more shattered, and then probably reset every month. But it's just something that that, like, oh wow, there's just this big war going on. Like you said, like you have all these factions in there. Like, could you have like 100 players in there with thousands of units, and you're just blowing up units all over the place like popcorn, right? And
So it'd be persistent, and
just
even
be
though you close it because you got to go to bed, when you come
yeah,
back
you
next
you
day,
close it and everything. You close it and everything that you had just disappears from the game, right? And
yeah. But you
you know,
come
you,
back
you get
and the
you get
fight is still there.
yeah. I mean, you get a bunch of people rage quitting, and if they knew their units were going to disappear the minute before they'd, so you'd have to balance the game that way to say, if this person was almost ready to kill you, and there's a leaderboard with that, you have to work around that. But I do think there is kind of a way that you can have like this, just there's always a war going on in there, and
I wonder
You know,
how it would work with like if a new person comes into a mature game, then they're going to have nothing. The new person and the other guy's going to have heaps of stuff. So what just
yeah, I think you have to. I think you have to have areas where people can sort of turtle down for a while and build up at least enough of a bunch of units. You
Oh,
know,
okay. So when
yeah,
someone joins, it opens up a new section of the map at the back, and it just keeps
yeah,
unlocking sections backwards. That's a pretty cool
yeah,
idea.
yeah. So yeah, I think there's always ways to work around some of these designs, and yeah, again, a lot of these other games do it. Again, you look at PUBG, how they do it with this, with the gas coming in, forcing everybody into a certain section of the island, right? And that was just a way to work around, like, how do you speed up this game? And easy, it's like someone probably came up with that idea, and people are like, "Yep, that works. Okay, we're done."
Yeah, you could even have a thing where for players who have been there for a long time, they're not. There's got a constricting radius. The
Yeah,
map isn't dead, but they can't control units past that radius or something. So they're encouraged to like go into the middle, but new players can take over those bases
yeah,
behind them, something like that. So you would create that flow, and then you would also prevent one user from just like dominating because he's been
right.
set up
Yeah,
so
yeah,
well.
yeah. I think there's always sort of checks and measures that you can put in to prevent people from owning that game. But yeah,
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. What about the Nomads artwork? So Nomads is the fifth faction that the community's been building for a very long time, but it's starting to come together now.
yeah. There we go.
All right, cool. So this is the fifth faction that they've been building. That's the ACU there. Um, this is obviously a bunch of units.
Right.
I'm interested in knowing what they picked as their overall design philosophy. I don't know what it was. I think
Yeah, I
maybe
mean, it looks very UEF inspired.
yeah, yeah. It's another human faction, and
Yeah.
it's they unlike the other factions, they don't have access to the gateways. They've they use like just really fast spaceships, I guess, faster than light travel.
Hmm.
But yeah, some of it's a bit boxy. I know like some of the units are older and they're gradually replacing them with more upgraded units. So
Hmm.
you'll see there's a bit of a difference.
Yeah, a little rounding on the edges of them, and
Yeah, some definitely look more mature than others.
hmm yeah,
But
especially tanks.
maybe just like how Cybern was based on triangles and
Hmm.
that type of thing, maybe Nomads needs a kind of a theme to structure all of the models around. What theme could a mercenary nomadic spacefaring faction have?
Yeah, I think if it's like, if they're nomadic, I think there's one of the things you could have is something that's sort of made up of you know spare parts, that may not be so symmetrical. Um, Again, it kind of depends on what you kind of want to do with that faction. But if you have, if they're just sort of, you know, sort of units that have been sort of pushed out, are they going to have the most modern ones? Or are they going to have something that's kind of a little more hacked together? Um,
Yeah, kind of like a ghetto
yeah, yeah,
unit.
exactly. Yeah, you could have something that kind of like, again, you could have something that may look like it's culled together from UEF, Cybran and Seraphim parts. Like, it's, hey, we're just kind of like, you know, collecting bits and pieces from across the universe and putting them together.
That would also make it easy to make the models.
Yep, yeah, for sure. If you just make them from a thing, I think then it's just making sure that they um, the silhouettes of them make them stand out from from the other factions. And again, I think you can do that with again, you can have it so that if you have all these parts that you taken from other things and you've just painted over them, again, you know, some sort of haphazard way, right? So again, they don't look so, because again, UEF is very, again, sort of the square boxy, it's very utilitarian, and for this here, it almost looks like these units are, a cousin of them. Again, these ones kind of look Cybern right here.
True, that's true.
Yeah.
Because they've got the triangles.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, you could look Cybern as long as you look like it's like you've stolen them from the Cybern.
Yeah, yeah. So in that respect, they can basically do anything they want, and it fits.
Mhm.
You've come up with a really nice justification for them doing anything. That's the experimental unit. They got an experimental transport where they can carry ships and lots and lots of units. They can carry other experimentals as well. This is
Cool.
an experimental beamer, so it shoots a laser beam. I think it shoots it through a hole here and it comes out, even though it's not on the picture that way. I think that's how it works. And that transport can carry that beamer and it can shoot while in the transport. So it's like a T4 Ghetto gunship, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the ACU. Yeah. Any other feedback on all of that?
No, I think it's awesome. Creating your own faction.
It's a nice community project, and as you would know, there's heaps of things that go into it besides the modeling and the concept art. They had to make their own shaders. They're having to make their own suite of tools, like to export things from Blender and all sorts of things. So they're running into all the same problems that you would have run into, but without the budget to actually do any of it. Yeah, so it's a bit of a labor of love, and it's been going on for a long time now. So if anybody has any questions for Mike, can you please add them in the comments below? But besides that, Mike, thank you heaps for your time. It's been really interesting to talk to you.
Heck, good. I'm glad.
I know lots of people will be interested to hear what you had to say. And I just really appreciate you taking the time out to spend with us and talk about Supreme Commander and Forge Alliance.
Yeah, no problem, Mike. My pleasure. It was great. Thank you.
Cool.
All right.
Well,
look forward to seeing people's questions.
All right. Great. I'll catch you around. See you later.
All right. Cheers. Bye.